Can you say something about let's back up to the Arab slave trade because we have not
Certainly.
discussed that at all. We've discussed, as we mentioned, that the 7th century Arab influence and especially Islamic influence going across North Africa, going into Europe. I think now we just discussed some of that trade, Islamic as well as Arab trade there on the east coast of Africa. Now, how did the Arab slave trade of Africa develop? Because certainly it preceded, the European slave trade. Long before the European slave trade, certainly Africans were, sold into slavery in the Middle East. And I think you mentioned that about Persia, and because we know that there were slave revolts in Mesopotamia. There are large numbers of in Mesopotamia. Can you take us through that period?
The truth here is there's a lot that we don't know because the historians don't really want to go there, right? So there's a lot that we don't know, but this is what we can infer. The Arabs conquered Egypt, or began their conquest of Egypt, in December 639 AD, right? From there, they seized what is today Libya. After that, they seized what is today Tunisia. In those days, it would have been Carthage. They seized Algeria, Morocco. These places would have been called Mauritania back in the day. And they seized all of these places. And by 708 AD, the whole of North Africa was under Arab rule. Now, no one wants to say this explicitly, but we can deduce that the indigenous North Africans were the first group of people to be mass enslaved and deported in chains to the Middle East. Right? No one wants to say that because they don't want to admit that North Africans were originally Africans, and they don't want to admit that those people were the first victims of Arab slavery like that. Yeah. But even when you read in between the lines, even people that try to deny that the original North Africans were Africans will admit that the Prophet of Islam was sent a black slave called Maria the Copt. They all say that, right? Now, how did Maria the Copt, Maria the Egyptian, become a black slave if there were no black people there? Again, no scholar wants to address that, but yeah. So that would be your first wave then of Africans being enslaved. And then they would have ended up in the Middle East. They would have ended up in places like Basra. They would have ended up in places in other places in Mesopotamia, where, as you rightly say, 7th century to the 9th century, there was such a concentration of black people in the Middle East that they were able to stage uprisings known as the Revolt of the Zenge. The same word we were talking about before, Zenge, Zanzibar, Zenchi, it's the same word, right? Okay, so, and the revolt of the Zenge is a great history in itself, enslaved people overthrowing and that kind of thing, right? Then the permanent, if you like, presence of Arabians in North Africa, where they had largely now displaced the original inhabitants.
As a thank you for visiting our website, we are giving you a free copy of our exclusive 100 Black History Facts, which is in fact a taster of our course content. Make sure you leave your email address and we will send it right to you. We hope it inspires you to dig deeper into your history and heritage.
They were able to set up trading networks across the Sahara. And in those trading networks, you now had people south of the Sahara being captured and then sent across to North Africa in trading caravans. And the people that manned those trading caravans were, sad to say, black people, the Tuaregs. Yeah. And so you had that kind of thing happening. And then there was an empire in medieval West Central Africa called Kanem Bornu. And Kanem Bornu, a lot of their, it's an empire, so you've got the King of Kings, and then you've got the different states. And the states are the Arabs, by keeping the kings in debt, would then request of the kings, well, pay us your debt and pay us your debt in people. And that meant Kanem Bornu became seriously involved in trafficking Black people from south of the Sahara, across the Sahara into North Africa. So that's another way the slavery thing happened. And then in 1698, Arabs from Oman and Muscat, and it has to be said, some of those Arabs from Oman were then and are now Black. Sorry to say, but this is the truth. They took control of East Africa. They made Zanzibar the center of their operation. So Zanzibar, which used to be a grand African city, was now being turned into a slave market. And then by the time we get to the 19th century, I've got a source that says, by 1839, Zanzibar was pulling out 40 to 45,000 Africans per year in mass enslavement. And not only that, you had Arabs and Afro-Arabs and so on and so forth. You've heard of somebody called Tipu Tip, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He was half Arab, half African, but if you actually look at the images of him, he's actually Black. Yeah, so he was presumably half Omani, half African. He was on some serious nonsense. And places like Tanzania, Uganda, Eastern Congo, these places were being devastated by mass enslavement by the likes of Tipu Tip and the other people controlling East Africa from Oman. And that resulted in a lot of horror during that time period, especially the 19th century. So the reason I'm clearing this up is to make it clear that East Africa did have an African history before 1698. After 1698, it's not an African history anymore, do you see?